tragic and unresolved murders in Canadian history. On March 29, 1975, Sharron left her home in Montreal to meet friends at a local pizzeria, but she never returned. As the hours passed, her mother, Yvonne, grew increasingly concerned, and by the time Sharron hadn't returned home that evening, a sense of fear began to settle in. 3 days later, on April 1, 1975, Sharron's body was discovered in a vacant lot in Longueuil, Quebec. The brutal nature of her murder, which involved physical violence and suffocation, left the community in shock. Sharron's death sparked an outpouring of grief and left her family, friends, and a city struggling to understand how such a tragedy could unfold in their own midst. What initially appeared to be a missing persons case quickly revealed itself as something much darker. The investigation, however, hit numerous roadblocks, and the case went unsolved for almost 5 decades. Despite the passage of time, the memory of Sharron's life and the desire for justice never faded, especially for a family who held onto hope. In 2023, DNA technology provided the breakthrough needed to finally solve the case, but it came too late for Sharron's family to experience the full relief of justice served. Sharron Kim Prior, born on February 9, 1959, in Montreal, Quebec, was a bright and ambitious young girl with a promising future ahead of her. Raised in the vibrant community of Point St. Charles, Sharron was surrounded by a loving family, including her mother Yvonne and her younger siblings. Despite her parents' divorce, Sharron's bond with her family remained strong, and she often took on the role of caregiver, looking out for her younger brothers and sisters. From a young age, Sharron was known for her kindness and determination. She excelled academically and was passionate about animals, a love that led her to dream of becoming a veterinarian. Sharron worked part-time at a local store to save money for her future, balancing work and school with remarkable discipline and focus. Her dedication to her studies and future goals earned her respect from her teachers and peers. Outside of her academic pursuits, Sharron had a deep love for sports, particularly judo, where she demonstrated both physical skill and mental fortitude. Her life was full of promise. She was kind-hearted, generous, and full of optimism. However, the tragic events of March 29, 1975, would cut her promising future short, leaving her family and community devastated. On the afternoon of March 29, 1975, Sharron Prior left her home in Montreal, dressed in a light blue blouse, jeans, and sneakers, to meet her friends at a local pizzeria. It seemed like an ordinary day, just another outing for the 16-year-old. She told her mother, Yvonne, she would return soon. But as hours passed and Sharron did not come home, Yvonne's worry grew. By 11 p.m., with no word from Sharron, Yvonne called the pizzeria, only to be told that Sharron never arrived. Immediately, Yvonne reported her daughter missing, a feeling of dread sinking in. Local police initially brushed off the concern, assuming Sharron might have run away or was simply spending time with friends. But Yvonne knew better. Something was wrong. The entire community mobilized, with friends, neighbors, and family members combing the area, calling Sharron's name through the streets and alleys, but there was no sign of her. As the hours stretched into the night and then into the next day, the search intensified. Yet, there was still no trace of Sharron. As day 3 dawned, the realization set in that something far more sinister had happened, and this was no ordinary disappearance. What had seemed like a simple, innocent errand had turned into an urgent, heart-wrenching mystery. On April 1, 1975, 3 agonizing days after Sharron's disappearance, a group of young people searching a vacant lot in Longueuil, Quebec, made a chilling discovery. Hidden among the overgrown brush, they found a young woman's body, partially exposed and showing signs of brutal violence. It was Sharron. Her body was battered. She had been assaulted, beaten, and suffocated. Her wrists were bound with string, and her jeans were torn, indicating a violent struggle and an attempt to escape. The scene was horrifying, and the brutality of the crime shook the community to its core. Nearby, a man's t-shirt was discovered, a crucial piece of evidence that would play a key role in the investigation. The brutality of the crime indicated that this was not a random act, but something far more calculated. The police were quick to arrive at the scene, and the discovery sent shockwaves through the town. For Sharron's family, it was a heartbreaking confirmation of their worst fear. Their daughter had been murdered. Despite the physical evidence found at the scene, the case was far from resolved. With the forensic technology of the time, there were no immediate answers. The t-shirt would remain an important clue, but it would take decades before it could be fully analyzed. Meanwhile, Sharron's family, already reeling from the trauma of her disappearance, now faced the painful truth of her brutal death. The discovery of Sharron's body sparked an immediate investigation, but it soon became apparent that the road to justice would be anything but straightforward. Despite the numerous interviews with over 38 people, including friends, family members, and even strangers who might have been in the area, the investigation quickly ran into a series of dead ends. At the time, the absence of advanced forensic technology hindered the ability to make sense of the evidence. The police found themselves with no clear suspects, and the t-shirt found near the crime scene went unanalyzed for years. The lack of technological resources meant that vital evidence was left untapped, further complicating the case. As the investigation stalled, the police's initial reluctance to treat Sharron's disappearance as a high-priority case contributed to a growing sense of frustration within her family and the community. Months turned into years, and Sharron's family fought tirelessly for answers, but the case seemed to fall into obscurity. The pain of not knowing who was responsible for such a brutal act weighed heavily on them. As the case grew colder, rumors began to circulate that Sharron's death might be linked to a serial killer, especially since other young women in the area had vanished under similar circumstances. However, the theory remained unsubstantiated, and the lack of solid evidence prevented the case from advancing further. The mounting frustration and grief felt by the community were palpable. As time passed, hope for resolution began to fade, but the Prior family's resolve to seek justice for Sharron remained unbroken, even as the years slipped by. In the mid-2020s, a significant leap in forensic technology brought new hope to Sharron Prior's case. The emergence of DNA technology allowed investigators to revisit the case, something previously unimaginable in the 1970s. The t-shirt found near Sharron's body, which had been preserved for decades, was sent for re-examination. This time, modern forensic methods allowed the extraction of viable DNA, something that had not been possible with the old techniques available in the 1970s. After extracting the DNA from the t-shirt, investigators compared it with a vast array of databases, and after months of painstaking work, a breakthrough emerged. The DNA was matched to Franklin Maywood Romine, an American criminal who had lived in Montreal in the 1970s. Romine had a history of violent crime, including prior convictions for sexual assault. His criminal record, which had been available to U.S. authorities, had never been cross-referenced with Canadian databases at the time of the original investigation, which had allowed him to escape suspicion for years. The identification of Romine as the perpetrator was a shocking revelation. He had died in 1982, and with his passing, the family's hopes of seeing him brought to trial were dashed. However, the DNA breakthrough provided the closure they had long awaited, even if it came too late. Sharron's family had suffered for decades, and while the identification of the killer brought some relief, the long wait for justice left them with mixed emotions, relief tinged with sadness. This breakthrough was a testament to the power of modern forensic science and how advancements in DNA technology can solve cases that have remained cold for years, sometimes decades. The shocking revelation of Franklin Maywood Romine as Sharron Prior's killer brought the case to a bittersweet close. Romine, who had lived in Montreal during the 1970s, had a history of violent crimes, including rape convictions in the United States before moving to Canada. Despite his criminal background, Romine's name had never surfaced in the initial investigation into Sharron's murder. This oversight allowed him to evade scrutiny for decades, until DNA technology finally linked him to the crime. Romine, then 29 years old, was confirmed as the perpetrator through several key pieces of evidence. Tire tracks found near the crime scene matched the make and model of Romine's car. Witness descriptions of the suspect's physical appearance, which aligned with Romine's profile, added further weight to the case against him. However, despite these crucial leads, Romine was never questioned during the investigation in the 1970s, largely due to a failure to cross-check his criminal record between Canadian and U.S. authorities. By the time Romine was identified as the killer, he had passed away in 1982, which meant the justice that Sharron's family sought would never be fully realized in a courtroom. The case exposed significant flaws in the investigation, including lapses in communication, improper record keeping, and a lack of collaboration between international law enforcement agencies. Romine's death before he could face trial left the family with the pain of knowing that the killer had eluded justice for so many years, but at least they had finally learned the truth. The identification of Romine as Sharron's killer raised important questions about how many other cases had been similarly mishandled, and whether there were other criminals who had escaped detection due to similar investigative failures. The murder of Sharron Prior is a tragic reminder of how systemic failures in law enforcement can delay justice for victims and their families. Despite the violent nature of Sharron's murder, the investigation was hindered by several lapses, many of which are still felt by her family today. Franklin Romine's violent criminal past was not adequately cross-checked between U.S. and Canadian law enforcement agencies, which allowed him to evade suspicion for decades. This lack of coordination meant that Romine's criminal history, including his prior rape convictions, never came to light during the initial investigation. Key pieces of evidence, such as the t-shirt found near the crime scene, conclusive evidence, and it wasn't until modern DNA testing became available that the case finally moved forward. Witness descriptions and tips from the public were also mishandled, further prolonging the investigation. Had these leads been properly pursued, Sharron's killer might have been caught much sooner. The case also highlights the dangers of institutional indifference, a lack of resources, and ineffective collaboration between different law enforcement agencies. These issues created roadblocks that meant Sharron's killer remained free for years. While the identification of Romine provided some closure, it also revealed the missed opportunities to prevent further violence. For Sharron's family, the realization that justice could have been served earlier remains a painful part of their journey, as they have to live with the fact that key mistakes delayed their ability to find peace. The investigation's failure to identify Romine sooner